but my name is Patrick Frank, and I'm the president of the board of Scenic Los Angeles. And we are in the middle of some very big issues right now on the sign front and on the scenic beauty front in LA. They are both percolating along quite a bit, and there we are. So the first thing on the agenda is to discuss the citywide sign ordinance. And the thing that happened most recently was at the end of February, the Planning Commission met and it voted to reaffirm its position, which is in favor of version B+ of the sign ordinance. And if you remember, version B+ is the version that we prefer. Version B+ would keep digital billboards in recognized sign districts, keep them kind of penned up safely out of danger in the sign districts. And they voted strongly, unanimously to reaffirm that. And they even added a couple of more restrictions on it in terms of the hours of operation of digital signs, stipulating that they all would have to be shut off at midnight. So this was a good thing to happen. And then the next step is going to be that it goes back to the Plum Committee, because the Plum Committee is going to have to take it up again. And so after the Planning Commission voted and reaffirmed its version, the planning staff has to draw up a memo for Plum summarizing what just happened. And right now the planning staff is involved in that. They're drawing up that memo for the Plum Committee. And then it'll come back to Plum again, because the Plum version of the sign ordinance is quite different from the Planning Commission's version. The Plum version is far more friendly to the sign companies. It would allow digital billboards in all kinds of commercial zones. In probably almost every neighborhood of Los Angeles could get a digital billboard under the Plum version, which we completely disfavor and we're advocating against. So the two groups are really at loggerheads, and the ball is going to be in Plum's court this summer. And we don't know when the Plum Committee is going to take it up. So it could be before the summer council break, or it could be after. I've heard that the Plum Committee has a lot on its plate right now and they're kind of backed up. So we don't know when that's going to happen, but when that happens, you will hear about it. We will notify everybody before it happens so that we can all weigh in. Now, over the course of this meeting, there's a chat function, and if you want to ask a question, I invite you to do so in the chat, okay? So if anybody wants to ask a question about the sign ordinance, the citywide sign ordinance, put it in the chat and we'll see if we can answer it as I transition to the next item on the agenda. I will also be reading the chat questions at the very end of the meeting, so that I want to make sure everybody has a chance to weigh in on anything they want to ask us about this whole thing. All right, let's move on to the next item. And the next item is the digital bus shelter proposal that is in front of the Board of Public Works. The Board of Public Works wrote a request for proposals from the sign companies to create a whole new class of bus shelter in LA, to abolish all the old ones and create 3,000 new ones. And the request for proposal stipulates that these bus shelters will have shade and will have current bus information and a bench like you expect. But the request for proposals also stipulates that these new shelters will have a digital ad screen measuring 4 by 6 feet and passenger tracking, so that if you come within 20 feet of a shelter because you're riding a bus or passing in a car, data will be lifted from your cell phone about your demographic and your location information. So these are both very scary prospects to us. The idea that you're passenger tracked when you just go by a shelter is revolting enough. And then to have to listen to or watch an ad while you do it is just, it's bad on any number of counts. And the request for proposals was issued without any significant feedback from the general public. There was almost no public outreach. They created almost a secret committee of what they called stakeholders, and we didn't even hear about it. So we are we are encouraging and advocating that this be stopped, slowed down, reduced in scope, all of that stuff. And the request for proposals went out in February, and the proposals have come in. The city has received 4 proposals from 4 different companies to redesign all the LA bus shelters. And by now they were supposed to have narrowed it down to a short list, but that they are late in doing that. We are not sure why. The proposals were due at the end of March, and we expected sometime last month even, or at the beginning of this month, that the Streets LA staff at Public Works would have narrowed that down already and made the short list, but they haven't even done that. So what we're waiting for is the short list to be released, and the next step will be a public demonstration where the shortlist companies are going to erect mock-ups of the possible shelters that they're planning on erecting. Now, that particular, I'm going to promote Brenda here to co-host. Hold on, give me a second. There we go. Brenda, you're now a co-host. That's going to require signing a contract with a provider. And the city signed a previous contract to a previous provider to put in the current bus shelters, and that contract didn't really go so well. So Brenda, I would like you to unmute yourself and start your video and give us a brief report, just like a couple of minutes long, on how that previous contract went for you guys out in Boyle Heights. So unmute yourself and then take a couple of minutes to tell us about the previous contract and how that went for you guys.
Well, let me see. Okay. So can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So my name is Brenda Martinez. I am the Transportation and Environmental Committee Chair for the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council and a board member for Scenic LA. I also I'm a board member and an area representative for the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council. The previous contract didn't go so well. They didn't place them, the shelters that were not placed in accordance to the needs, but based on advertisement. So they were mainly on just busy streets, but not necessarily where they were needed, where people needed the shade, and so on and so forth. They also were never kept clean. They were very dirty. They never maintained the shelters. The shelters at one point were used for people to sleep, so for homeless people, and it really didn't go well with our community. There was definitely no maintenance. And then this new proposal has not been presented to our community. We find out through Scenic LA, this was never presented, never approached by the city before in any way. Our community is not even aware of this happening. So, yeah. Definitely we have no voice because we didn't know about this. We were not able to say what we think about this.
I got that. So the issues resolved around the shelters went where they could earn the most money for the ad companies rather than for the needs of the people. And when you wanted maintenance done, you had trouble getting that done. Wow. Okay.
There was, there's shelters that have not been maintained for years. Yeah. There's even like trash cans that were placed by those shelters, but they were never picked up. They were overflowing. So
great. Wow. So it sounds like folks in Boyle Heights aren't looking forward to the new contract then, are you?
No, not really. In fact, we wrote a CIS opposing it. We are definitely supporting Scenic LA with the new changes, and keeping the B+ will be ideal. And doing more outreach in communities like Boyle Heights, El Sereno,
Yeah.
Lincoln Heights, Highland
Yeah.
Park, you know, where people really utilize the transit. Also where they're constantly thinking and saying that they're building affordable housing that are transit friendly, and they want people to use the transit, but they don't make it transit friendly.
I
So
get that.
they
Okay.
want us to do that, but they don't take us into consideration for any decisions.
Okay, Brenda, that's a report from on the ground about how the previous contract seemed to go. And judging by that, we don't know what's going to happen. Okay. Now, we have a lot of concerns about it, as partly you just heard from Brenda. We are concerned about distracting of drivers and accidents and pedestrian fatalities. Now, I have made Nathan O'Neill a co-host. Nathan O'Neill is a specialist in the Scenic America office in Washington, D.C., and he has got some maps to share with us. So I think, Nathan, you should be empowered to share your screen and take us through some of the maps that will correlate data about traffic safety and bus shelter and billboard locations in LA. So go ahead, Nathan.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So thanks for that introduction. I'm Nathan O'Neill. I'm the Policy and Program Director at Scenic America. I'm based in Washington, but we have chapters and affiliates throughout the country, and Los Angeles is one of our most active and most effective chapters, and we work with Patrick and his team very closely. So we've been partnering with Scenic Los Angeles for about the last year, looking at billboard locations throughout Los Angeles and their potential impacts on certain populations being exposed to billboard blight. We work with Scenic Los Angeles on a lot of other scenic conservation issues as well, but this one is a special priority for us. So in light of the bus shelter proposal, we have this acute need to really understand the impacts of billboards on the city of Los Angeles because of the potential of having electronic advertising in these new bus shelters. So we've been looking, recently we've been looking in particular detail at where these bus shelters are and also what impact they might have on pedestrian safety and pedestrian accidents if signs are installed in these shelters. So this project has been a top priority for us very recently. So to get started, I just want to show you sort of what we're talking about. This is the city of Los Angeles. This is the city boundaries. So this image is created using a GIS tool. So this is not just what you see here is a photo file, but the software itself, this is very dynamic piece of information. All the data that we load into it has special attributes, ways to have it interact with other data sets. So I can show you a few of those now. But as part of our ongoing efforts to help the Scenic Los Angeles team, we've been looking at, say, billboard locations versus poverty rates in different census tracts. So this information, of course, will be updated as new US Census data becomes available. But this is just part of our ongoing broader effort to help promote scenic conservation in Los Angeles. So just for a little context, this is our bus shelter research that I'm sharing with you comes out of this broader project that we've done.
So what we're seeing there is the correlation between poverty and the location of billboards.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Keep going.
So one thing that we're interested in, helping people understand ways that sensitive populations might be exposed to scenic blight. But one thing we rely on a lot is this data that we've gotten from the Los Angeles Department of Buildings and Safety, their offsite sign periodic inspection program. The city does an inventory of all the billboards in the city of Los Angeles, so their locations, their permit number, their owner. It tracks things like sign height, how many panels are in the structure, and it also tracks whether or not the permit is current. And the program also keeps track of whether the sign has been altered in violation of its permit. So What you see here is that this is a high level view of where a lot of these so-called illegal signs are. So in Los Angeles, there are currently, as of 2019, which is the most recently available periodic inspection program data, as of 2019, there are 654 billboards that don't have permits. And there are another 890 that were altered in violation of their permits. So the total non-compliant billboards in the city of Los Angeles is about 1,544 that we know of, which is almost 20% of the total 8,040 billboards in the city of Los Angeles. So obviously this is a major problem. And I can show you what it looks like with the other 6,500 billboards included. So these are the legal billboards as well as the illegal billboards. So there are 8,040 billboards throughout the city, billboard faces throughout the city of Los Angeles. And then this data comes directly from Outfront Media, JC.co themselves. This data, these are locations of bus shelters throughout the city of Los Angeles. So all the pertinent information about the bus shelters is captured. There's attribute files and tables for all the bus shelters that you see here. So these yellow dots, these indicate where bus shelters can be found throughout the city. And I'll show in a little bit of more close-up view of the city. You can see in detail what these location bus shelter data, what it looks like close up. But there are, in this data set anyway, there are 1,870 total bus shelters, which I believe is a little bit short of what the contract awarded to Outfront and JC.co. I believe they're supposed to install more than that. So they haven't necessarily filled the terms of the contract. But the agreement to install these shelters is set to expire in 2021. So that has prompted the in part the new proposal that we're dealing with now. But before I move on, the reason that we care about signs, billboards, whether they are permitted or not, with respect to pedestrian safety is because there's a large body of literature that we actually host on our Scenic America website that describes the influence that billboards can have on driver behavior. So, you know, by definition, billboards are supposed to grab the attention of people in the roadway. So they're designed, in other words, to take drivers' attention away from driving. So there's been a lot of pushback from billboard industry about how distracting billboards are and what influence they might have on overall driver safety. But we have a lot of research indicating the potential hazards that they create, especially digital billboards, but static signs in general also can, to a certain extent, distract drivers. So that distracted driving behavior could potentially, one would imagine, translate into pedestrian safety problems as well. So with that in mind, we've been looking at the potential influence that billboard locations might have on pedestrian safety in the city of Los Angeles. So this map should be pretty sobering. This comes from special data curated by the California Highway Patrol, their statewide integrated traffic record system. So any user, any stakeholder is able to generate reports from this system. So we have reports from calendar years 2017, 2018, and 2019. And what these reports include is pedestrian involved collisions. So you can filter for LA County or LA City and then get all the pedestrian involved collision information from any of those years of interest. So as you can see there, this is a major problem in the city of Los Angeles. The overall trend for these 3 years is not downward. It's about flat. So the annual rate of pedestrian accidents is not decreasing during this time frame, which is directly contrary to what the city of Los Angeles wants to accomplish with its Vision Zero goals. So thus far, there's not been a lot of progress made, unfortunately, in reaching that goal. So the data file that you see here, once again, behind this nice visual, each point that you see has a lot of data and attribute information behind it. So you can select a data point using the GIS tool, and you can see when the collision occurred. You can look at the severity of the collision, what the calendar date, the time of day, the road conditions, whether or not the driver is under the influence of alcohol or other drugs. So you're able to get a very detailed view of Los Angeles. So what we found in this data is that between 2017 and 2019, Los Angeles had 9,143 pedestrians struck by vehicles. And of that number, 364 people were killed, which is obviously not acceptable to anyone. So the non-fatal accidents during that 3-year period, those are the green dots that you see here on the map. And then those fatal accidents are these purple dots. So obviously this is very tragic. Just want to show you what it looks like in comparison with these other things that we're looking at. So here's what it looks like compared to the bus shelter locations and the billboard locations. We also have information about the current sign districts in the city of Los Angeles. So we're still doing some analysis on this. We haven't necessarily seen any patterns about the influence of these sign districts with relation to pedestrian accidents, but it's something that we want to look at in more detail in the future.
Can we zoom in a bit on a neighborhood like Hollywood to see how that plays down, where we can really see on a granular level?
Yeah, absolutely.
Block
That's
by
a great
block.
segue. Thank you, Patrick. So our next slide, this is a zoomed in version of what this data looks like. So what you're looking at, these are the kind of light purple polygon mask you see behind all this data. These correspond to neighborhood councils. So we have data, detailed information about all the neighborhood council locations and their boundaries throughout the city of Los Angeles. So we can pull this information for any neighborhood council that we want. But I've created a special file that sort of consolidates all the neighborhood councils that are in this Hollywood area. So that includes Los Feliz, Mid-City, Central Hollywood, Hollywood Studio District, East Hollywood, Rampart Village, Hollywood Hills West, Greater Wilshire, Wilshire Center, Koreatown, and then Hollywood United. So all of those neighborhood councils are included in the detailed information that I can give you in a little bit.
What are the bigger circles?
That's a great question. So this is part of our analysis. In addition to trying to, just map where all the signs are, all the bus shelters are, where the pedestrian accidents are, we're interested in the potential influence that these variables might have on pedestrian accidents. So the light green circles you see, these are area buffers. So that's 100-meter radius buffer around a bus shelter. And we've selected that distance because we think that's the distance at which a sign might have influence on driver behavior. So for this particular snapshot that you see, we're doing an analysis on the proximity of billboards to bus shelters. So we captured information about how many bus shelters have signs near them. And then we also have other data about the number of pedestrian accidents near bus shelters, the number of pedestrian accidents near billboards. We're able to do some sort of cursory analysis. And the reason for doing this is, or one major goal we have from doing this work is that the city is supposed to do a traffic safety study for the bus shelter proposal. And apparently they haven't done anything that they need to do regarding that traffic safety study. So the information that I'm describing, this is curated by the city or by the state of California. It's available. And the city, of course, has capacity to do this work in a more detailed way. So really, we want to prompt them to do a traffic safety study, not move forward with any decision before they've actually looked at the potential impacts of the bus shelter proposal. So the information we were able to pull out, I think highlights the need for doing a traffic safety study. So there are, once again, 1,870 bus shelters throughout the city of Los Angeles. So There were 752 bus shelters that had signs near them, so within that 100-meter buffer. And 24% of all pedestrian accidents took place within 100 meters of a bus shelter, which is sobering, but it also makes sense because that's where you expect to have high pedestrian traffic, is near those bus shelters. So with that said, we would estimate that there would be about 908 accidents near a bus shelter, but in fact, there were 955 pedestrian accidents near bus shelters that were close to Billboard. So sorry to clarify a little bit. Of all the, we would expect there to be 908 accidents near bus shelters that were also proximate to billboards. And in fact, the number was 955. So there's actually a slightly higher rate of pedestrian accidents near these bus shelters that are close to billboards, which sort of corroborates the existing information we have about the influence of billboards on pedestrian safety. So this is another data point in the literature for billboards actually negatively impacting pedestrian safety. So just based on this very cursory analysis, we certainly think there's a demonstrated need to do a traffic safety study. But with regard to what you see on your screen, this is a more detailed view, and what we're able to do just a really sort of cursory analysis of what's going on in these particular neighborhood councils or districts. So what you see here, there are 1,416 pedestrian accidents in this special neighborhood council data file that you see. So all the neighborhood councils around Hollywood, 1,416 pedestrian accidents, which is about 16% of all the pedestrian accidents in the city of Los Angeles during this 3-year period. This area includes 274 bus shelters and about 784 billboards. So you can see there's some patterns emerging just from this visualization. So you have high traffic routes where you see concentrations of bus shelters and also pedestrian accidents, but there are also concentrations of pedestrian accidents evident around the bus shelters that are close to billboards as well. So the one way to extend this work and more analysis that we'd like to do is to compare this with traffic volume in these throughout the city of Los Angeles, but particularly in these areas of interest. We want to see how that compares with the rate of pedestrian accidents, and if we can get information on like traffic speed and things like that, that could really help further strengthen the case for doing a traffic safety study. So all this is really just to say that the city is not doing its due diligence, and we really do want to encourage them to do that traffic safety study. But we're going to keep moving forward with this analysis and see what else we can figure out. But just the work we've done already, we think is very compelling.
Okay, Nathan, that's great. That kind of hits it where it hurts, doesn't it? And then in the context of that, it's worth mentioning the project known as Vision Zero that the mayor pioneered 3 or 4 years ago, and the goal of getting pedestrian fatalities down to 0. Well, guess what? That's not working. And then Nathan's maps were about current bus shelters, but guess what? The bus shelter program that the Streets LA, that the Public Works program is developing right now would add digital billboards to that thing on every bus shelter. So in a situation that is already problematic, where traffic fatalities and accidents go up near billboards, and then Vision Zero is not working anyway. So to that mix, the proposal is to add more digital screens carrying advertising. This is where we really, this is where our advocacy springs from right there. What I would like to do now is see if anybody has any questions about the bus shelter program. And if you do, just put them in the chat and we'll get it out there. Wendy's asking if we can get this information in a summary. Yes, we can. We will prepare one, no doubt about it. If anybody else has a question, I invite you to put it into the chat. All right, people are typing. While they're typing, I will consider our announcements about the bus shelter program closed for now. We are still just to wrap up this part of the agenda. We are still waiting for the short list of the companies, and we are still waiting for the public demonstration projects. And when the public demonstration projects are announced, we will be back in touch with everybody on this particular issue. Let's see, something came into the chat. What other individuals or local organizations are supporting Scenic LA on this issue? Well, we are now, I'm going around to neighborhood councils and speaking, and so that's the basis of our outreach. Other organizations, I invite them to contact me and join up with us. And we would love to team up with any organization or neighborhood council to go with that. Okay, another question. Will bus stops with only a bench now have a shelter added with the new program? The answer to that is no. The current bus benches will remain as they are. That's a separate contract. The proposal is to remove all of the old shelters and put in new shelters with a shelter over the top of a person's head. So the plan is to keep those current benches in the current locations. Rosalio Garcia says, please invite Pacoima Beautiful to join this effort. You know where to reach me, Rosalio. Yes. And Pacoima Neighborhood Council should be contacted. Absolutely. I'm writing all this down. What other comments or questions do people have? Put them in the chat. Let me move in towards the conclusion of this meeting by discussing two future things that Scenic LA is working on. None of this has reached a point where any action is needed by any individual. But when they do, of course, we'll let you know. There's a question from Wendy, who would need to do the public safety study? That would be the Public Works Department would commission it, because they're the ones who are signing the contract with the city. Scenic LA is now in the initial stages of investigating scenic byways in LA County. There are some roads in LA County that are eligible to be designated as scenic byways by Caltrans. Caltrans, the state transportation office, designates roads as scenic byways. There are a bunch of them already in California, but there aren't very many. There's none in LA County, really. So we want Caltrans to designate some state scenic byways, and there are a couple that we're especially focused on. Highway 210 up west of Pasadena, not in Pasadena, but heading west and northwest from Pasadena, is a possible scenic byway, and we have in the beginning stages of studying how we might go about getting that designated. And believe it or not, Highway 1, the PCH, is not a scenic byway, and it's eligible to be designated as one. So we are now in the beginning stages of investigating how we might go about doing that. There is already a template, because scenic chapters and affiliates around the country have spearheaded this. And so we're going to try to look into doing that at the same time. And another issue that we're also working on for the future is undergrounding of utility lines. Undergrounding of utility lines would reduce the fire danger, besides contributing to scenic beauty. And Councilmember Blumenfield has written a council motion encouraging studies of undergrounding utility lines in the city of LA by horizontal boring, rather than by digging a trench, by horizontal boring. And we support that resolution or that motion. It's in the beginning stages right now, and you will be hearing from us about further activism in regards to undergrounding utility lines. Now, a couple of questions came in while I was just mouthing off. Tell us about the money. How much do billboard companies contribute to politicians? Well, Every member of the planning committee of the city council has received campaign contributions from politicians. This is a legal thing and it happens. And the city council members vary in how much they listen to that. They all take the money from, I don't know of one, well, maybe I know of one council member that has refused it, but they don't generally refuse money from billboard companies. Which council members are pushing this corporate agenda? Well, two of the former members that were on the council previously were spearheading corporate influence on billboards. That was Jose Huizar, who was the chair of the planning committee, and Mitchell Englander, who was the vice chair of the planning committee of the city council, the Plum Committee. And they are both off the board, and Englander's been pled guilty to corruption, and Huizar has been indicted. So when that happened, when those indictments happened, the billboard companies lost two friends, and other council members are starting to step up in terms of fulfilling that function of being the cheerleader for the billboard companies, but so far they're not as vocal as the previous people. There's a question about what protections do scenic highways bring. The most important protection that comes to scenic highways, if Caltrans designates it, is it's illegal to put any more new billboards on it. Okay, I'm still waiting for questions. I will wait for just a couple more minutes. Mark Dutton says, please include fiber optic cable. Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's absolutely correct. That will be part of any future utility undergrounding. Everything Jose touched must be re-examined by the city. We're advocating for that, but it's difficult to open those contracts, but we are advocating to do exactly that. Okay, we will have 10 more seconds if anybody wants to type anything in the chat. And if not, we will bring this meeting to a close. I thank everyone for coming. Everybody who signed up for this meeting is on our mailing list, and you will be getting future information about all of the issues touched on here tonight. That is to say, the citywide sign ordinance, the new bus shelter program, the possible scenic byways, and undergrounding of utility lines. So we will be keeping you informed. Thank you all for coming. And I will push the end button for this meeting for now.